This video contains discussions of child abuse. Viewer discretion advised.
Light a candle right now and pray for the family.
Please bring baby Dane home, Father. Please bring him home.
On March 1st, 2025, 2-year-old Dane Paulsen vanished from his family's Riverside property in Lincoln County, Oregon. What followed was an 11-day search involving over 200 volunteers, 22 divers, and multiple agencies including the FBI, a search that would end in heartbreak. On March 11th, volunteer diver Juan Heredia, a man with over 30 years of search and recovery experience, made the discovery that would bring closure to a grieving community. 3 miles downstream from where Dane disappeared, Juan found him.
But how did a toddler end up alone near a dangerous river? And why, 7 months later, does his father Aaron Paulsen now face criminal charges for child neglect? Dane Paulsen was everything a 2-year-old should be: curious, fearless, and full of life. Those who knew him described him as friendly, comfortable around strangers, and always ready for the next adventure. He loved 2 things above all else: water and vehicles. Whether it was his bright red ATV or splashing in puddles, Dane was drawn to movement and exploration.
Dane is friendly and fearless and was comfortable around strangers and water, but cannot swim. Dane is known to love water and vehicles.
But there was one critical detail his family knew well. Dane could not swim. Dane lived with his parents, Aaron Paulsen and Siletz Jackson, along with his 8-year-old sister. By all accounts, he was a happy child in a family that loved him, but the environment surrounding their home would prove to be far more dangerous than anyone anticipated. To understand what happened on March 1st, we need to understand not just who Dane was, but where he lived and the risks that surrounded him every single day. Aaron Paulsen and Siletz Jackson's property sat in a uniquely vulnerable location, bordered on one side by the Siletz River and on the other by Highway 229. For a fearless toddler who loved exploration, this created a dual threat: fast-moving water in one direction, high-speed traffic in the other. The Siletz River isn't a gentle stream. It's a powerful waterway that flows through Lincoln County, Oregon, carrying snowmelt and rainfall toward the Pacific Ocean. During early March, when Dane disappeared, the river was running cold and fast from winter storms. Aaron Paulsen worked away from home, and on March 1st, he had just arrived back at the property. According to his account, Dane was playing inside when Aaron got home. At some point, and this is where the timeline becomes critical, Dane walked out a door. Aaron did not immediately follow him. Siletz Jackson, Dane's mother, has publicly defended Aaron. She maintains that he had only just arrived home, that the disappearance happened within minutes, and that Aaron should not be held criminally responsible for what she believes was a tragic accident. But prosecutors saw something different in those critical minutes. They saw a gap in supervision that, under Oregon law, constituted criminal negligence.
Out the back door, and he comes straight to the trailer. I hear him. He goes, beep, 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 beep. And I was like, oh, Bubby, I'm coming. I hear him by the door, and he laughs so oddly. I was like, that is so, like, laughing like somebody is tickling him. And I was like, and then it's silence. And I was like, Dane? Dane, here, you stereotype with some hysterical mother. We live on Siletz Reservation. It's some native kid, and it doesn't matter to them.
Let's talk about the reality of toddler drowning, because the statistics are devastating. Drowning is the leading cause of death for children ages 1 to 4 in the United States. Every year, approximately 400 children in this age group lose their lives to drowning. And here's what makes it so terrifying. It happens fast, and it happens silently. A toddler can drown in as little as 2 inches of water in less than 2 minutes. There's no splashing, no screaming for help, just silence. This is why constant supervision near water isn't just recommended. It's legally required in many states, including Oregon. The distance from the Paulsen family's home to the Siletz River was short enough for a curious 2-year-old to cover in minutes. The riverbank had no barriers, no fencing, no physical obstacles to prevent a child from reaching the water's edge. For a toddler who loved water but couldn't swim, who was described as fearless and comfortable exploring on his own, this environment required one thing above all else: constant, vigilant supervision. On March 1, 2025, prosecutors alleged that supervision failed, and Dane Paulsen walked toward the river alone. Let that sink in.
You declare day 2 that their main priority is the water and they think the child is in the water. If he was kidnapped and people were onto him, you think if you were to get out of this, you'd probably place the body in the water, right?
March 1, 2025 started as an ordinary day for the Paulsen family. Aaron had been away from the property and was returning home. Dane was inside, playing as any 2-year-old would. What happened next would be reconstructed through witness statements, physical evidence, and Aaron's own account to investigators. But the timeline reveals a critical gap, a window of time where a toddler was unsupervised near a deadly river. According to the investigation, Aaron Paulsen arrived home. Dane was inside the residence. At some point after Aaron's arrival, Dane walked out a door. Aaron did not immediately follow him. How long was Dane outside alone? Minutes. But for a 2-year-old who couldn't swim, who was drawn to water, who lived steps away from a fast-moving river, minutes were all it took. When Aaron realized Dane was missing, he searched the property. He checked the house. He looked around the immediate area. And then, the horrifying realization set in. Dane was gone. Before we continue with what happened to Dane, I need to ask something important of you. If this investigation matters to you, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Every subscription helps these stories reach more people who might recognize warning signs and protect a child in danger. Share this video. Each share could save a life. In the comments, tell me your city and what time you're watching. This helps me publish investigations when they'll reach the most people and have the greatest impact on child safety. If you want to directly support this work, consider leaving a super thanks or joining our membership. Members get early access to investigations and help fund the research that goes into cases like Dane's. Every contribution allows me to dedicate more time to seeking justice for vulnerable children. This channel exists to tell stories about children who needed protection but didn't get it. Each investigation is a lesson in recognizing dangerous situations before tragedy strikes. Watch other videos on this channel. The knowledge you gain could help you notice warning signs and save a child's life one day. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. Now let's continue with Dane's story. The 911 call came in quickly. A 2-year-old boy, missing from a Riverside property, last seen wearing specific clothing. Nonverbal, unable to call for help. And most critically, he couldn't swim. Lincoln County Sheriff's Office responded immediately. Within minutes, deputies were on scene. Within the hour, a massive search operation was mobilizing. This wasn't just a missing child case. This was a race against time near a dangerous waterway. A command center was established at the family's property. Search and rescue teams began arriving. Canine units were deployed to track Dane's scent. Dive teams prepared to search the river, and volunteers from across Lincoln County started showing up, ready to help find a missing toddler. The initial search perimeter focused on the area surrounding the home, the riverbank, the nearby woods, the Highway 229 corridor. Every possible direction a 2-year-old could have wandered was being systematically searched. But as the sun began to set on March 1st, Dane Paulsen was still missing, and the Siletz River continued flowing, cold and relentless, toward the Pacific Ocean. As the search continued, investigators began examining the circumstances that led to Dane's disappearance, and what they found would eventually lead to criminal charges. Under Oregon law, specifically Oregon Revised Statute 163.545, a person commits the crime of child neglect in the second degree when they leave a child under 10 years old unattended in or at any place for such period of time as may be likely to endanger the health or welfare of such child. The law is clear. Supervision of young children isn't optional. It's a legal requirement. And when that supervision occurs near known hazards like rivers, highways, or other dangerous environments, the standard of care is even higher. According to the Lincoln County District Attorney's Office, Aaron Paulsen was responsible for supervising Dane on March 1st. He was the adult present at the property when Dane disappeared, and prosecutors allege he failed to maintain the level of supervision required by law. The allegation is specific. Aaron knew, or should have known, that the property bordered a dangerous river. He knew Dane was a curious, fearless toddler who loved water but couldn't swim. He knew constant supervision was necessary. And yet, Dane was able to leave the house and reach the river unnoticed. This is where the legal definition of criminal negligence comes into play. It's not about intent. Prosecutors aren't alleging Aaron wanted harm to come to his son. It's about a failure to perceive a substantial and unjustifiable risk that a reasonable person would have recognized. In other words, would a reasonable parent, knowing their 2-year-old couldn't swim and lived next to a dangerous river, allow that child to leave the house unsupervised? The grand jury that reviewed this case concluded the answer was no. 7 randomly selected citizens reviewed all the evidence. Witness statements, physical evidence, expert testimony on child supervision standards, and the timeline of events on March 1st. At least 5 of those 7 jurors agreed there was sufficient evidence to charge Aaron Paulsen with child neglect in the second degree. It's important to understand what this charge means. This is a Class A misdemeanor, not a felony. The maximum penalty is 1 year in jail and a fine of up to $6,250. Prosecutors aren't alleging murder, manslaughter, or intentional harm. They're alleging a failure to supervise that created a deadly risk. Shamay Jackson, Dane's mother, vehemently disagrees with these charges. She maintains Aaron had just arrived home, that the disappearance happened within minutes, and that no parent could have prevented what she believes was a tragic accident. But the legal question isn't whether Aaron is a good father or whether he loved his son. The question is whether he met the legal standard of supervision required to protect a vulnerable child from a known danger. And on March 1st, 2025, Dane Paulsen walked to the Siletz River alone. Let the weight settle. When a child goes missing near water, every second counts, and the response to Dane Paulsen's disappearance was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours of the 911 call, Lincoln County Sheriff's Office had mobilized a search operation that would grow into one of the largest missing child searches in Oregon's recent history. The numbers tell the story of a community refusing to give up. Over 200 volunteers, 22 specialized divers, 6 K-9 units trained in water and land search, 88 search and rescue members from multiple counties, 40 investigators, including agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This wasn't just a local response. This was a coordinated effort involving multiple agencies, volunteer organizations, and community members who dropped everything to search for a missing 2-year-old. Dive teams entered the frigid Siletz River repeatedly, battling strong currents and near-zero visibility. K-9 units tracked scent trails along the riverbank and through surrounding woods. Volunteers walked grid patterns through dense brush, calling Dane's name, hoping for any sign of the missing toddler. The command center at the family's property became a hub of coordinated activity. Maps covering every inch of searched terrain, radio communications directing teams to new areas, and a growing sense of urgency as hours turned into days. What happened in Lincoln County over those 11 days was extraordinary. People who had never met the Paulsen family showed up to help. Strangers became search volunteers. Local businesses donated food and supplies. The community rallied around one mission: bring Dane home. Volunteers described the search as emotionally devastating but necessary. Many were parents themselves, imagining the unthinkable: their own child missing, their own family in crisis. That empathy drove them to search in difficult terrain, in cold weather, day after day. Some volunteers had search and rescue experience. Others had none. They simply wanted to help. They walked miles of riverbank, searched through thick brush, and refused to stop looking even as hope began to fade. This is what communities do when a child is in danger. They mobilize. They organize. They refuse to give up. And in Lincoln County, that solidarity was on full display. But despite the massive effort, despite the hundreds of people searching, despite the specialized equipment and trained professionals, Dane remained missing. Searching the Siletz River for a missing toddler presented challenges that even experienced dive teams found daunting. The river doesn't flow gently through Lincoln County. It moves fast, especially in early March when winter runoff swells the current. Divers entering the water had to contend with speeds that could push them downstream, making systematic searches extremely difficult. Water temperature was another brutal factor. In early March, the Siletz runs cold enough to cause hypothermia in minutes. Divers could only stay submerged for limited periods before needing to surface and warm up. But perhaps the most challenging obstacle was visibility. The Siletz River, fed by mountain runoff and disturbed by recent storms, had near zero visibility underwater. Divers were searching essentially blind, feeling along the riverbed with their hands, unable to see more than inches in front of their masks. The search area was massive, a 3-mile stretch of river from the family's property downstream. That's 3 miles of fast-moving water, with countless places a small body could become lodged, under logs, caught in vegetation, wedged between rocks. Every day, dive teams entered the water knowing the odds were against them, but they kept searching. March 1st became March 2nd, then March 3rd. Days blurred together as the search continued relentlessly. By day 3, the search perimeter had expanded significantly. Teams were now searching farther downstream, considering the possibility that the current had carried Dane miles from where he entered the water. By day 5, the emotional toll on searchers was becoming visible. These were people who had been working around the clock, driven by hope, but facing the grim reality that time was running out. By day 7, 1 full week after Dane disappeared, the search had evolved from a rescue operation to a recovery mission. No one said it out loud, but everyone understood. They were no longer searching for a living child. They were searching to bring Dane home to his family. Strategies changed as the days progressed. Dive teams focused on areas where debris naturally collects in the river. Search dogs were brought back to recheck areas previously searched. Aerial drones scanned the riverbank from above, looking for anything ground teams might have missed. The Paulsen family waited. The community prayed. And the searchers refused to quit. March 8th, March 9th, March 10th. Each day brought renewed effort, fresh volunteers, and the same heartbreaking result: no sign of Dane. And then, on March 11th, 11 days after a 2-year-old boy walked out of his house and never came back, everything changed. After 11 days of searching, when hope was nearly gone, a new team arrived in Lincoln County. Juan Heredia, founder of the Angels Recovery Dive Team, traveled from California to Oregon, answering a call he's answered for families across the country for more than 30 years. Heredia's mission is simple but profound: bring closure to families who are living their worst nightmare. His team is made up of volunteers, not for profit or recognition, but out of compassion and duty. For Juan, this isn't just expertise, it's a calling. He has recovered loved ones from rivers, lakes, and oceans, using a lifetime of experience to help others find answers when all hope seems lost. On this day, the community's last hope rested with a diver who had dedicated his life to bringing missing children home. On March 11, 2025, Juan Heredia entered the Siletz River, choosing a section nearly 3 miles downstream from where Dane was last seen. The current had carried Dane farther than anyone imagined, beyond the reach of earlier search teams. Heredia worked methodically, reading the river's subtle clues, the way the current slowed, where debris collected, where a small body might gently come to rest. After 2 hours, in cold, murky water, Heredia found Dane. There are no words for moments like these, no details that need to be spoken. What matters is that after 11 days, Dane was finally brought home. The search was over. For a family, for a community, there was at last an answer, and the beginning of healing. News of the discovery rippled through Lincoln County. The volunteers who had searched for days gathered at the river's edge, some in silence, some in tears, all united in grief. Memorials appeared, flowers, stuffed animals, handwritten notes, lining the banks of the Siletz, each a testament to a child lost and a community's love. Vigils were held. Candles flickered in the night as neighbors, friends, and strangers came together to remember Dane. The Paulsen family released a brief statement, expressing gratitude to everyone who searched, to the community that refused to give up, and to Juan Heredia, who brought their son home. The pain was overwhelming, but so was the solidarity. In the wake of loss, Lincoln County stood together, mourning, remembering, and asking the questions that would soon move from the riverbank to the courtroom. The Lincoln County Major Crimes Team immediately launched a comprehensive investigation. This wasn't just local law enforcement. This was a coordinated effort involving 40 investigators and agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Investigators conducted extensive interviews. They spoke with Aaron Paulsen, Dane's father. They interviewed Siletz Jackson, Dane's mother. They talked to neighbors, family members, and anyone who had been on the property that day. They reviewed surveillance footage from nearby properties. They analyzed cell phone records. They followed up on community tips. Every piece of information was documented, cross-referenced, and evaluated. What emerged from this investigation was a timeline. On February 28, 2025, Dane Paulsen was inside his home with his father, Aaron. At some point during the afternoon, Dane left the house. He walked across the property, made his way to the Siletz River, and entered the water. The evidence showed that Dane wandered to the river independently. No one was with him. No one was watching him. He was unsupervised in a situation that investigators would later determine was inherently dangerous for a 2-year-old child. The question investigators had to answer was whether this lack of supervision rose to the level of criminal negligence under Oregon law. On October 16, 2025, more than 7 months after Dane's death, a Lincoln County grand jury convened to review the evidence. Grand juries are a critical part of the criminal justice system. They consist of randomly selected citizens, in this case, 7 people from Lincoln County, who review all the evidence presented by prosecutors and determine whether there is sufficient cause to bring criminal charges. The grand jury heard testimony from investigators. They reviewed the autopsy report. They examined the timeline of events on February 28th. They considered the layout of the property, the proximity to the river, and the dangers posed to a 2-year-old child. After reviewing all the evidence, at least 5 of the 7 grand jurors agreed. There was sufficient evidence to indict Aaron Paulsen on 1 count of child neglect in the 2nd degree. While prosecutors moved forward with charges against Aaron Paulsen, Dane's mother, Siletz Jackson, spoke publicly in his defense. Jackson maintained that Aaron had just arrived home when Dane disappeared. She disputed the timeline presented by investigators, arguing that Aaron had been on the property for only minutes before realizing Dane was missing. In interviews and social media posts, Siletz described Aaron as a devoted father who would never knowingly put Dane in danger. She emphasized that what happened was a tragic accident, not criminal negligence. But Siletz's defense of Aaron went beyond disputing the timeline. She raised questions about what happened that day, questions that suggested the investigation might have missed something. Siletz reported seeing unidentified men around the property in the days before Dane's disappearance. She described hearing an unusual laugh from Dane that didn't sound like his normal laughter. These details, she believed, pointed to possibilities the investigation hadn't fully explored.
Siletz Jackson suggested that Dane's death might not have been a simple drowning. She raised the possibility of kidnapping or foul play, that someone else might have been involved in what happened to her son. These are the questions of a grieving mother searching for answers. When a child dies suddenly, it's natural for parents to ask, could there be another explanation? Could someone be responsible? Siletz criticized the investigation, believing that authorities had focused too quickly on Aaron and hadn't pursued all possible leads. She wanted investigators to consider every possibility, no matter how unlikely. Law enforcement responded to these concerns. Lincoln County Sheriff's Office stated that all leads were thoroughly investigated. The 40 investigators and FBI agents had followed up on every tip, reviewed all surveillance footage, and interviewed everyone with potential information. The medical examiner's findings supported their conclusion. Dane drowned. There was no evidence of abduction, no signs of foul play, no indication that anyone else was involved. But for Siletz Jackson, accepting that her son simply wandered to the river and drowned while his father was home meant accepting something almost unbearable, that this tragedy could have been prevented. It's easier to believe in an outside threat, an unknown danger, than to accept that the danger was something as ordinary as an unfenced river and a moment of inattention. Siletz's defense of Aaron and her alternative theories reflected the complexity of this case. A family torn apart by tragedy, struggling to make sense of the senseless, and facing a legal system that had determined someone must be held accountable.
As of November 3, 2025, Aaron Paulsen has entered a plea of not guilty to the charge of child neglect in the second degree. The court has imposed conditions while this case proceeds. Aaron is currently restricted from having unsupervised contact with children under the age of 5. This is a standard protective measure in cases involving child welfare. A status hearing is scheduled for December 15, 2025. At that hearing, the court will review the case's progress and determine next steps. As of now, no trial date has been set. This case remains open. The legal process continues, and the questions at its heart about supervision, responsibility, and prevention remain unanswered. Dane Paulsen was 2 years old. He loved exploring, playing, discovering the world around him. He trusted the adults in his life to keep him safe. This case highlights something we cannot ignore: the critical importance of supervision when children are near water, and the devastating consequences when that vigilance fails. According to the Centers for Disease Control, drowning is the leading cause of death for children ages 1 to 4. Most of these drownings happen in natural bodies of water, rivers, lakes, ponds, often within minutes of a child being left unsupervised. These deaths are preventable, every single one of them. We seek justice for Dane and for all vulnerable children who depend on the adults in their lives to recognize danger, to remain vigilant, and to keep them safe. If this case matters to you, If you believe in holding adults accountable for the safety of the children in their care, subscribe to this channel. We investigate cases of child abuse, neglect, and exploitation every single day. We give voice to the most vulnerable. We demand answers, and we never stop fighting for justice. Thank you for watching, and remember, vigilance saves lives.